Good afternoon, everyone. We will begin promptly at 2 o'clock with the talk. Okay, it is 2 o'clock. I think we can start. So, good afternoon and welcome to this month's talk on men's health. So, today's talk will cover the various aspects of wellness that affect men. My name is Jacqueline Prinsloo and I'm from the Bestmed Tempo team. And I want to thank you for taking the time to attend this session. And I trust that you will find this session informative. I will shortly hand over to our speaker. We will allow at the end of the presentations any questions that you might have to the speaker. You are also welcome to type your question in the chat box or raise your hand at the end of the presentation, and we can then unmute you to ask your question. So it's my pleasure to welcome our guest speaker, Vaughan Matumbu. Vaughan is passionate about leadership, education, and self-mastery. His background spans over various industries, giving him experience that has been instrumental in honing strong people skills. His innovation and learning to fly have been at the center of his career and having been lead in multiple successful projects and pilots. So Vaughan is definitely a go-getter. So welcome, Vaughan. We are looking forward to listening to you.
Good day, Jacqueline. Thank you so much. Before you disappear, am I visible and audible?
You are, yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'll just share my screen quickly. There we go. And is my screen visible?
Perfect.
Awesome. So good day, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for having me here. I have no doubt that we'll talk about a lot of very informative subjects around men's health, and we do quite a lot of these talks, and we find that People remember stuff they knew, and they'd forgotten. People get new information, and at the end of the day, people become better people as we talk about some of the things that we talk about. Um, I Yeah, that was quite an extensive introduction. Um, but yes, I have been in the corporate wellness space for a few years now. I've worked for quite a few of Bestmed's competitors, and it's amazing and it's lovely to see corporates actually um, take the health and well-being of their employees very seriously. This is beautiful to watch. So, without wasting time, we'll get into the talk. Um, okay. For some reason, oh, there we go. Awesome. So why are we here? We're basically here to empower each other and to empower men through knowledge to build better family units that result in better societies and a better country. So if you are a better individual, you will go back to your family and you will add value to that family. You will be a better person in that family, and you'll raise, better kids. You will be a better partner, a better uncle, and at the end of the day, that family will grow in a very healthy way, and whoever you've touched goes back into society and contributes a lot better. And I think knowledge is one of the biggest things that we need to focus on. And so that's why we're going to have a talk about some of these subjects. But there's a quote by Reverend Oyedepo that says, "Knowledge is to the brain what clothes are to the body." And so you find out that when people do not have do not have knowledge about a certain subject, every time they try and do stuff around that subject that they lack knowledge of, they are akin to someone who's walking around naked. So we want to talk about men's health and make sure that we are equipped. And to further stress my point with regards to knowledge, I I want to tell you a little story. This is about an axe competition between a 60-year-old man and a 30-year-old man, right? An older gentleman was 60 and a younger gentleman was 30. And the competition was quite simple. They were given an axe and told to chop down an oak tree, right? And they were given a tree of equal diameter. And so they were told the first person to chop it down wins 1 million rand. So at 6 a.m., they arrive on the day, given their axes, and they start chopping down at the tree. They're heading away at the tree. But around noon, the older gentleman decides, okay, I will take an hour to nap, I'll take an hour to eat, and the last hour out of my 3 hour break, I will sharpen my axe and go back to chopping down my tree. When the younger gentleman notices that the older gentleman at noon has stopped, naturally he thinks, oh my goodness, I've got the advantage. Let me gain um, some ground and chop away while he's wasting time eating, napping, and sharpening his axe. When the older gentleman comes back at 3 o'clock and proceeds um, chopping down his tree, um, he makes a lot more ground and a lot more progress. By 6 p.m., he is done. His tree falls over, he wins the 1 million rands. The younger gentleman was surprised because he was barely halfway through um, chopping down his tree. And he goes to the older gentleman and says, how did you do it? Because you took a 3 hour break. I was ahead of you. How did you manage to do it? And the older gentleman says, while you were chopping away at your tree, your axe was growing a lot more blunter. It required a lot more energy, and you were getting a lot more tired. So he explained to him that it's necessary from time to time to take a break out of your busy schedule, a break from your goals, a break from life, a break from everything that you are doing, and take a step back and sharpen your axe. And that's what we're going to do here. We're here to sharpen our axes, like I said, so that we go back to our worlds, and your world is your sphere of contact, and you add a lot more value. You want to go back to your job knowing a lot more. You want to go back to your family knowing a lot more, and and better navigate your world so that the best out of you comes to the surface. So these are here are some of the areas we'll touch on in the next few minutes. Your emotional and mental well-being. So we'll touch on stress and depression. It affects a lot of us, whether we feel it or not, right? The next part of it is our lifestyles and physical well-being. So your diet, your exercise, and your weight management. We'll talk about chronic illness. We'll talk about preventative screening. So these are very broad topics, but we'll zero in and make sure that we understand their applicability to us as men, right? And obviously, we'll touch on things like erectile dysfunction and male-specific subjects around these points. Now, let's talk about your emotional and mental well-being. Now, this can be defined as your emotional. So your emotional and mental well-being can be defined as how you think, how you feel, how you behave, how life affects you, how you cope with it, how you engage with others, and the choices you make. So you can wake up in the morning and be as positive as you want to be, but things happen. You can encounter a puncture on your way to work. How do you deal with that? How do you respond to that? And how do you carry on with your day after that happens? A lot of us have life-changing events. I'll give you an example. I went through a retrenchment in December 2020, and I thought, it's a retrenchment. It's not the worst thing that could happen. I'm a young man. I'll get to do my master's. I I'll laze around for a year and live off my parents. And life will be good. And by the time the year ends, I would have gotten something. So retrenchment happens, and 13 days later, my dad passes away. My whole world turned upside down, and I had to navigate grieving as well as supporting my mom and my two younger siblings. So I I had to build some sort of emotional and mental fortitude so I could navigate that entire thing and that entire process. And so that's what your emotional and mental well-being is all about. It's how how you deal with the things you face and how they affect you, and how you in turn relate with those around you in your surroundings, right? Now let's talk about stress. Stress can be defined as feelings of anxiety, frustration, and tension due to change or pressure. And like I said, we encounter a lot of things. Those feelings of anxiety and the frustration and the tension, and how the change and the pressure affects you. How do you deal with that? Right? So that is stress. These are some of the symptoms of stress. So some of you might be here, you don't think you're stressed, but when we talk about the symptoms, you'll start to, question those feelings of pressure and that tension you tend to feel, right? So these are some of the symptoms of stress. Your inability to concentrate. Inability to concentrate. You'd be surprised how often you have conversations with people and you walk away and you've forgotten what you've talked about, right? And that happens, right? Your inability to concentrate. A lot of men engage in sexual intimacy with their partners, with their wives, and they're absent-minded. They're not there. And you find that because you're absent-minded, you might lose an erection, for example. You might find that it's no longer an enjoyable process, right? So your inability to concentrate could be a symptom of stress. The next point is feeling overwhelmed. You feel like, oh my goodness, it's all too much. I've had a colleague just scream to the top of his voice, and it's like, I've had it. I can't. I just want to switch off. And he felt so overwhelmed, and he couldn't even pinpoint what it was that made him feel that way. Memory loss. I give you an example now of how you can talk to someone, walk away, and forget what you talked about. You know, how many of us have driven from the office um, to home, and you find yourself driving into your driveway, but you don't remember how you got there? You've driven for 30 minutes. You don't remember what happened. You haven't bumped into anyone. You didn't cause an accident, but you just forgot. You're deep in thought or you're distracted. Memory loss is one of the symptoms of stress. I remember leaving my place, going to Bedford Center, and I'm in the shop. I bought everything except the thing I wanted to go there and buy. I forgot what I wanted to buy. I get home, and an hour later, I'm like, oh my goodness, I forgot. I went there for milk, right? So memory loss is an example of a symptom of stress. Eating habits change. It's happened to me quite often where I stop eating and I live off sweets and sugary things, right? And obviously your weight will change if the stress is prolonged. Headaches are an example of a symptom of stress. Increased irritability. Now imagine being a partner and your wife sends you a text, you get to work and says, babe, we need to talk. A lot of men snap and they get so angry because they are now feeling anxious. What did I do? Did you find out I used the kids' school fees money to buy new golf clubs? And and they're so irritable and they'll send a voice note. I had a colleague who sent a voice note and said, what do you want to talk about? You're making me feel anxious. You're putting so much pressure on me. And he snapped at her. And she's like, oh no, I wanted us to talk about what do you want to have for dinner? Women do that. And so increased irritability might be a symptom of stress. And so I talked earlier about when I defined emotional and mental well-being, about how you deal with the things that happen during your day and how other people experience you. Now, imagine being stressed. You don't know you're stressed. You are irritable. Imagine how your kids and your partner experience you, your your colleagues. Imagine how they experience you if you're an irritable person and you do not know. You don't know you're irritable, or you've made irritability a character trait. Everyone knows I'm irritable, and you don't confront it and you don't deal with it, but you are a stressed individual. So your increased irritability could be a a warning sign of the fact that you are stressed. A decreased sex drive is another symptom of stress. So you feel like, you know what, I don't want to have sex. I don't want to have sex. I've been in a few women's health talks, and a lot of groups that deal with these things and marital counselings and so forth. And you'd be surprised how many women say, my partner hasn't touched me in months. My partner isn't interested in initiating sex. And he used to want to initiate sex, or he used to initiate sex almost every day. Even when I was pregnant, he wanted to initiate sex. And you realize that as you grow older and climb the corporate ladder, as you grow older and you have a lot more responsibilities and kids, you find that you're very stressed and a lot of things and a lot of people require your attention. And you might realize that your sex drive has decreased. And you think, ah, no, it's age. And you talk to older men and they're like, I'm Chana, I'm older now. I have no time for doing this thing. This was in my 20s. Now I want to make money. I want to finish paying off my bond. But how does your partner experience you? So these are just some of the symptoms of stress. And I want us now to talk about depression. So stress and depression are closely linked, but they're not they're not the same thing, right? Now, depression can be defined as persistent and extreme negative thoughts and feelings. So persistent and extreme negative thoughts and feelings. That is very key, right? These are characterized by a loss of interest in things that you usually enjoy, to the point where you feel like you're no longer functioning. You feel like you're a passenger in your own life. To some extent, you're the main character in this movie of your life that you're starring in. And a lot of people end up, when depressed, end up feeling like they're just going through the motions. Right. And these are some of the symptoms of depression. And like I said earlier, they are linked or similar to stress, but they're not the same. Remember, persistency and the extremity of the symptoms is what counts. Now, these are some of the symptoms: feeling sad or hopeless. You have these highs and lows that are unexplainable, right? So, feeling sad, feeling hopeless. And the crazy thing is, a lot of academics and high flyers think that they'd never be depressed. You might have paid off your bond and you're debt free, and you think, I'll never be depressed. And you'd be surprised that it affects even accomplished people, because it's not just because of external events that people fall into depression, but it can be chemical as well, right? Physiological. So, feeling sad and hopeless, a loss of interest in hobbies. You no longer want to go cycling, you don't want to go play golf, you don't want to do anything, right? Feelings of anger and rage. Remember when we talked about stress, we said irritability was one of the signs. Well, yeah, anger and rage could be such examples where you find that your child or your spouse has done something that obviously you are justifiable in being angry or upset at. But how angry and upset you get is not equivalent to the transgression. And you find that a lot of people are depressed and who do not know they're depressed will turn and become abusive, verbally abusive, emotionally abusive, even physically abusive, and they are depressed, right? And once you get to a point where your depression finds expression through anger and rage, a lot of what you do is unreversible. And so we need to talk about this, nip it in the bud, address the root cause to prevent extreme events from happening. So anger and rage are one of the symptoms. The next is a change in eating habits, much like stress. And remember, we said when defining depression, it's persistent and it's extreme. So a change in eating habits. The next one is unhealthy self-talk. You find that you say, I'm a failure. You find that you are constantly beating yourself down. You are hopeless, and you feel like, what, I'm unaccomplished and my life is a drag. I haven't done what I needed to do. And so you're constantly talking to yourself, and it's unhealthy, right? Your talk is unhealthy. The next is suicidal thoughts. You think, what, why don't I just take my life? No one will miss me, right? And the last one is a loss of interest in sex. A loss of interest in sex. There have been men who say, I am with my wife. We have sex once in 6 months. We have sex only when she initiates it. And you'd find there are some men who are depressed and they do not know it. They've lost all interest in sex. They eventually even start avoiding their partners. And so you find that it puts a lot of strain on the relationship. You'd find your partner thinking, maybe he is cheating. Maybe he's seeing someone else. Maybe I'm not attractive anymore. Um, my husband doesn't love me anymore. My husband doesn't cater to my needs. And you can see that you being stressed and not addressing the stress, you being depressed and not addressing the depression, you having all these emotional and mental things happening that you're not addressing and avoiding because you are a man, and I'm a South African man. We don't see therapists. We don't go for counseling. We don't need this and that. I just need a BO2. I just need to get away from my family. We tell ourselves all these things instead of addressing the core issues and the root issues and the root causes. You avoiding it puts a lot of pressure not only on yourself but on those around you, and it can only get worse, right? So that was your emotional and mental well-being. And so now I just want to talk about a few key things that you can do to address uh, those um, those two things, your stress and depression. Number one, eating right. Eating right. Your diet can change your mood. Your diet can change your mood. It's important to eat right. Um, being a young man, my and being under the care of my parents, I always felt really restricted. And I said, you know what, once I start working, I'll eat what I want to. And I ate sweets, I ate all of these things, and that resulted in me going to the dentist quite a few times, and root canals were expensive, and I lost a few teeth. But that simple example is just goes to tell you that what you eat does affect you, and does affect you in many different ways. And so you want to make sure you're eating right. You want to eat foods that are healthy for you. Avoid sugary foods, avoid salty foods, and you want to have a balanced diet, right? Practice healthy self-talk. Look at yourself in the mirror and recite all the good things that you've done. But what you can do for those around you is compliment them a lot. As hardy as your colleague might be, you'd find that they're good at other areas. As irritable as your manager might be, you'd find that they're very organized and they approve your leaves timelessly. And so you want to make sure that you communicate the good things that you appreciate about them. Right. So for yourself, practice healthy self-talk. But for those around you, support them. Make sure they hear words of affirmation. Make sure they hear the good things that they do. Right. Obviously, you being a workplace, people go through performance conversations and performance reviews and all of these things, and they hear all the things that they're not doing right. And obviously, companies and your company will reward good performance. But what you can do is take it a step further and say to your colleagues and share with your colleagues all the good things they're doing. This will definitely make a huge difference in their lives. And it will give them a lot more words to actually recite when they practice healthy self talk. And the next one here is try and regulate your sleeping patterns. Right. Make sure you sleep at a certain time and wake up at a particular time. Let your body get the rest it needs. How do you do this? Make sure you switch off the lights in your room. Very important. Make sure that you put your phone maybe on do not disturb mode. And obviously, depending on your phone, you can actually allow certain numbers to come through. So your spouse, your child, certain colleagues, you find that they can reach you, right? But you can block out certain numbers, right? Regulate your sleeping patterns. Exercise is the next one. Go play with your grandkid. Go play with your child. I've got dogs. Take them for a walk, right? Get out, get some sunlight, get some fresh air. Make sure that you get your body moving. And when you exercise, your body releases feel good hormones that will make you feel a lot better. You'll sleep a lot better, right? So you need to exercise. And gentlemen, because this is a man's health talk, I'll try and be a bit more candid. Sex is not exercise, right? Sex is not exercise. So please actually exercise, right? The next one is talk to your doctor. We'll talk a bit about preventative screening. But if you find out and if you think about the fact that we've talked about symptoms and you can actually relate and you can actually pick up that I've got one or more of those symptoms, talk to your doctor. And they'll refer you accordingly. You can talk to your HR, to HR here at work, and no doubt there are structures of support regarding your mental and emotional well-being, right? And the next one is try and do things you enjoy often. Try and do things that will make you feel good, non-destructive things, right? Like go play golf, pick out a new sport, travel a bit, go fishing. Very important, right? When we talk about lifestyle, and the next point is lifestyle and physical well-being. When we talk about lifestyle and physical well-being, this is very closely linked to chronic illness, right? Your diet affects you a lot. A lot of people who we found when doing wellness days and health check, a lot of people found with high cholesterol, diabetes, hypertension, all of them, well, most of them actually, you'd find were not eating right and lived sedentary lifestyles. And the excuse is, I do not have the time. So you want to make time to actually choose out what you eat, pick out what you eat. Very important, because over time you become what you eat. So if you have family history um, of high cholesterol, your diet could greatly impact whether you live with high cholesterol or not. If you've got family history of diabetes, or if you have been diagnosed with diabetes, the severity of that diabetes is closely linked to your diet. So that's very important. Your salt and your sugar intake, extremely important. Gentlemen, those of you who smoke, you want to make sure, and I won't try and convince you to stop smoking, but you want to make sure you're not a slave to alcohol or to cigarettes, for example. And I always encourage people who smoke. I said, cut down to 5 cigarettes a day. That way you know that you're very close to zero and you can stop at any time. But if you are on 20, if you're on 2 packs a day, guess what? Going all the way to zero when you are asked to for your health is going to be extremely difficult. So you maintain a very small amount of cigarettes that you consume, right? Exercise and weight management, right? It's very important to understand how your weight, how much role your weight plays in your performance sexually, how much of a role your weight management plays in you having a chronic illness or not, how you manage the chronic illness you already have been diagnosed with, and how big of a role your weight management plays on your emotional and mental well-being. That's extremely important. And we'll talk about a few things, right? And so I want to just highlight on the screen the importance of eating right, because a poor diet affects your energy levels, which in turn affect how you cope with things that happen around you. So you want to make sure that you eat foods that talk to your day-to-day needs and the life that you live. So if you were to be a marathon runner, you'd find that you would do carbo loading. If you're a sports person, you do carbo loading, where you eat the carbs that have the necessary amount of energy for the marathon you'd run. And so a lot of us, you'd find, live very busy lifestyles. You'd find that you wake up early, you go to bed late. You want to make sure that you have the right amount of energy to carry you through the days, to carry you through the decisions you have to make, to carry you through the engagements that you go through the day. You do not want to give your best at work and come home and your partner, your kids, your family doesn't experience you at your best. You don't want to do that. You don't want to be at your best at home and perform poorly at work. So you want to tailor make your diet to suit your needs throughout the day. And so you want to be very conscious of what you eat and what you take in. You want to watch the salty foods. You want to watch the red meat. You want to watch the sugary foods. And you want to make sure that you eat food that will speak to your day-to-day needs, right? And so this is very important. And so eating foods that are high in bad cholesterol, eating foods that are sugary, are known to speak to or to increase the risk of things like erectile dysfunction and low sperm count. And so a lot of men aren't cognizant or conscious of this. And you find that later on in life, they tend to struggle a bit and they can't really put a finger on it. But they haven't been managing their weight, they haven't been eating right, and they are unable to perform. And so a lot of us do know that you naturally compensate by looking for a home remedy or looking for a small blue pill at the pharmacy, but you haven't dealt with the root cause, which could be your diet and your weight management, right? So that's very important. Now, talking a bit about erectile dysfunction, it's usually caused by blood flow constraints to your lower part, the lower parts of the body, right? Specifically, to be candid, your penis. And so heart disease will affect you. High cholesterol will negatively affect you. Having a larger than you should stomach will affect you negatively, right? And so aerobic exercise, remember we're talking about lifestyle and physical well-being, aerobic exercise and managing your weight will assist you in pumping a lot more blood throughout the body, losing weight, maintaining a healthy weight, and making sure that there's easy blood flow throughout your body. And that will reduce the risk of erectile dysfunction. And to a large extent, those who are experiencing it could reduce it and be a bit healthier. Obesity um, is closely linked as well to heart disease and will naturally obviously cause erectile dysfunction. So I'm just highlighting the importance of looking at your lifestyle and physical well-being and how it affects you being male specific right on the screen. Now I want to talk about chronic illness and prevention as well as management, and we're almost done with the presentation. Now, chronic illness, on the previous screen, we said erectile dysfunction, it is linked to the health of your heart. We talked about the fact that your weight can affect you when it comes to erectile dysfunction. Now, obesity, diabetes, high cholesterol, heart disease can affect blood flow and naturally result in erectile dysfunction. So you want to be careful with regards to things that could lead to you having heart disease, right? Things that could lead to obesity. And those things are your lifestyle, how you eat, and how active you are, what you eat, and whether you're exercising or not. So you want to get to the root cause. You want to reverse it if you're already there. You want to manage it if you feel like, you know what, things are getting out of hand. And so weight management is extremely important, and it does speak to chronic illness. So most of these things can actually be prevented, but a lot of men, you know, aren't aware of it and don't, you know, don't take it seriously. But I remember having a conversation with my dad, um, and I said, "You need to exercise. You know, you're getting older." And he said, "There's no ways I'm jogging and running around for people to see me or going to the gym." And so I prescribed some exercises that you could do from home, and he was very active. And although he passed at 58, he didn't have any chronic illness. He's never had, you know, high blood pressure, and he never had issues. And he managed his weight. He was very active, and that actually gave him a much better experience. Right. Now, I want us to touch on preventative screening. So we've talked about your emotional and mental well-being. We've talked about lifestyle habits. We've touched on diet. We've touched on erectile dysfunction and how the choices we make with regards to activity, with regards to diet, with regards to managing our mental and emotional well-being, how they affect us. But the screen is extremely important, right? Preventative screening. You want to get ahead of the problem before it becomes a problem. You want to nip it in the bud. Talking about cancer, we do know that if cancer is picked up early enough, a severe event can be prevented. And so most of us need to be aware that preventative screening should become a norm and a norm in our lives as men, but in our families, right? So blood pressure screening. You want to make sure you check your blood pressure at least every 6 months. At least every 6 months, I will go get a medical done, right? And I do know that you would have a wellness day happening. You do have the wellness team coming with nurses saying we're having a wellness day. And guess what? A lot of women attend wellness days, but men tend to run away. They'll tell you they're busy. They'll tell you they have deadlines. They'll tell you no, I don't want to do any of that. But you want to check your blood pressure. And obviously, if you are over 40 years and if you have a history of high blood pressure, you want to make sure you check it every 3 months, at least every 3 months. If you are diagnosed with high blood pressure, you make sure you buy a machine and you check your blood pressure very often, right? I do know a lot of people check it every morning, they check it in the evening as well, right? Your blood glucose readings, so your blood sugar, you make sure you want to make sure you check that. So I do know diabetics check it daily, but if you have history of diabetes or family history, I mean, of diabetes, you want to make sure that you nip it in the bud, you are ahead of it. You want to make sure you change your diet to speak to this, and you want to prevent it and manage it as best as you can. So preventative screening is extremely important. Your cholesterol screenings, extremely important, right? And your cholesterol screenings, your blood sugar and your blood pressure will also speak to your diet and your level of exercise as well as your weight management, right? So your anthropometric measurements, that is your waist circumference. So about 2 centimeters below the belly button, sorry, above the belly button, you want to check your waist circumference and make sure that your waist circumference is in range, right? You want to make sure, and the range is 104 centimeters, right? But I do know that a lot of health professionals hold men to 94 centimeters. It was changed, I believe, about 4 years ago, right? 94 centimeters to around the belly button, right? Your waist circumference. So very important to manage that, right? So contrary to popular belief, a large belly doesn't speak of wealth. A large bank account does, right, men? So very important. Your weight, your BMI, extremely, extremely important, right? Your HIV tests, extremely important, gentlemen. It's important to do that, right? I know a lot of married men would tell you that my wife is tested, so I'm fine. While that is all noble and speaks to your faithfulness, um, do remember that a lot of events happen in our lives, and not necessarily, and not sexual events, right? You'd help someone and they have a cut and you do as well. And we go to hospital and obviously they do blood tests when before a transfusion or before an operation, and they sanitize the equipment and so forth. But it's very important that we're aware that we are individuals, although you are in a joint relationship with your partner, but you want to do an HIV test and make sure you hold up your end of the bargain, right? And obviously, I do believe that according to policy, it is a confidential test, so no one would know if you go to a wellness day and you do the HIV testing. Now, for men over 50, a prostate screening extremely important. Please go get your prostate checked. Now, men, I do know a lot of men do not want to do this because previously a doctor would put their finger into your butt and feel your prostate for any swelling and any irregular um, growth, etc. And men avoided it, but now you do get a finger prick, and you only do the next test if the finger prick alerts to something, right? So these are extremely important. You want to get ahead of a problem before it becomes a problem. And I think if we do this, we will actually make a lot of progress. So I've spoken for quite a bit. I've tried to make sure that I don't bombard you with a lot of information, but I think we would have gotten a bit of value. Um, if there are any questions, I would ask that you just type them in there, in the chat box. If you have any thoughts, you can type them in, and the program director can just help us navigate that, and we can talk about it. Thank you so much thank you so much for listening. And yeah, we can actually start to talk about that, right? And I'm seeing um, a few funny funny comments, right? And I think we can go through that, right? So I believe it's being recorded and can be shared accordingly. Um, so thank you so much. Um, so I
Vaughan,
see.
sorry for
Yes.
interrupting you. If anyone wants to ask a question, we have unmuted everyone, so you can just unmute yourself on your side and then ask your questions. Maybe not all at once, but I see John has his name up. John, would you like to ask your question? John, can you unmute yourself? Okay. While we wait for him, there's one question. I am in a sales role. I have heard that sales targets can be a good stress factor, but what indicators should I be aware of should this become a negative factor in my overall life?
Um, yes. Sales roles are naturally stressful, especially if you have targets, and if you're cold calling, for example. And not just sales, but a lot of roles are stressful. But speaking to sales directly, you also want to have good coping mechanisms, and those could be you going to the gym before work, going to the gym after work. It could be you giving yourself targets and taking short breaks throughout the day. So monitor your stress levels, revisit the symptoms that might point to stress, and you want to get ahead of it. I think that's the big thing. Look at the symptoms and have good coping mechanisms, and I think that might help you. But knowledge and self-education are very important. You want to actually read materials that speak to some of the pressures you face in your specific role. Talk to your manager, and see how best you can create an environment within the confines of what's expected to you at work that allows you to flourish. So I hope that that answers your question. Thank you.
Thanks. John, would you like to try again and unmute yourself?
Very much, and thank you, Vagan, for the presentation. My question will be just around the blood pressure thing, to say what is it that causes it to be inconsistent, but also is there anything for one to worry if the systolic one is forever high, but the diastolic one is normal at between 75 and 80, but the systolic one is just struggling between 140, 150. Is there something wrong in that regard? Thank you.
Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, you are asking me about the fluctuations as well as the systolic being high, the diastolic being low, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the first thing is talk to your doctor. I can't stress it enough. as much as we're here and we're discussing everything we're discussing, you want to make sure you talk to your doctor who knows your unique medical history and the factors that surround your blood pressure. I think that's very important. So fluctuations can happen from a wide range of things. You've got a performance review coming up. You are stressed. School fees is due. Um, you have an anniversary coming up. You sit through, traffic coming to work. So all of those things do play a role um, in the fluctuation of your blood pressure. Just to sidetrack a bit, I won't sidetrack. So they do play a role. So the activities throughout your day do play a role. Throughout your week, they do play a role. So you want to actually have a look at that, and talk to your doctor about the systolic and the diastolic. Your doctor will let you know if you should be worried about it, and healthy ranges. And what you never want to be confused about are the ranges that we would use at a wellness day or at a presentation versus what your doctor will say. Doctors tend to have a higher number that they let you get away with, while at the gym, we might tell you that it needs to be 130 over 80. But the doctor will say, you know what, knowing your unique medical history, 140, 145 is fine. You have done really well. You've come a long way. I hope I've answered your question, sir.
Okay. Cyril, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, so just wanted to find out something. I've got a constant visit with my doctor. Just wanted to find out about this thing, testosterone. What is your take on it?
So are you talking about ingesting testosterone that you've bought somewhere, or testosterone boosters, those type of supplements?
Yeah, yeah. With the age I'm in, the doctor did suggest that, okay, fine, you do qualify for testosterone after testing the limit, because I understand the limit is 12 and I think 32 or 35, somewhere there. It's just that I don't have the exact figure, but it ranges from there. Is it advisable to keep going for it, or just to test and see, and what is the minimum, what is the maximum, what is the acceptable level, if I can put it that way?
Okay, so it's your question. I will try give an answer, but like like I said earlier, I believe it was to John. You talk to your doctor. Your doctor knows when talking to him, you are open about your goals, why you need it, why you want to take it, and your doctor would do supporting, every test that's that speaks to factors to consider with regards to you, your goals, and your health, and the future of your health after taking that supplementation. So it's one of those things that we can discuss on a high level, but you talk to your doctor, and if you're unhappy with what you hear from your doctor, you get a second and third opinion from a doctor and subject matter experts that can actually help you make an informed decision. I hope that answers your question, sir.
Yeah, I would say partly, if I can put it that way, because if you get to the doctor and he can't live without charging you. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm not saying he's scamming me or something. We've got this relationship, him and I, for years.
Yeah.
So I do go for those checkups every now and
Yes.
then. I go for bloods where he checks cholesterol, cancer, and all that stuff, liver, you name it. Then he comes back and say, okay, fine, let's discuss your file. Then we discuss it. Then it got to a point where he says, when I did your testosterone test, your level is sitting here. Would you like it to be moved maybe to the middle, if I can put it that way? It's just said, I don't have the doctor's terminologies and all that stuff, but he said the minimum, I think it's 12. The highest is around 30s. So that's what I'm trying to find out. What is the acceptable level?
Okay, so I wouldn't know what the acceptable level of when it comes to testosterone is, because it's out of the scope of what we are talking about.
Mm.
But in your case, I'd suggest that you look for a subject matter expert and you look at peer-reviewed studies on the subject, and you do research from credible sources that have actually done the research, so that you know you didn't just Google and get an answer. Because at the end of the day, there's life after you taking the meds, life after you taking the injection, and you want to make sure you are healthy and you're in a place of advantage. So to be honest, I'd suggest that you, if you're uncomfortable with your doctor, look for a second opinion and a third opinion, but look for subject matter experts, and talk to a specialist about this.
No, thanks. I get that. Thanks.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Unfortunately, we can only go until 3 o'clock, so we've got about 7 minutes left or so. Kenneth, can you unmute yourself and just ask your question?
Much thank you for the presentation. I just a quick question. I just want to find out what the signs and symptoms are for issues with the prostate. I know you can have it. You normally have your test done prior to 50, but
Yes.
what would be the signs and symptoms if during the year if you haven't had a test? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for that question. So one of the symptoms is irregular urination. Sorry, not irregular urination, but the tap doesn't quite close that well. So that's one of the signs, one of the most common signs. The tap doesn't close that well. You find that you think you're done peeing, but the tap hasn't closed. That is extremely common, and that can be a telltale sign. The next is a bit of uncomfortability when urinating. To some extent, to a large extent, I've come across men who feel like going to the loo, but nothing comes out when they get there. So those are some of the most common ones. They find themselves standing there for quite some time, and so that is those two are the most common ones that can let you know that there is a bit of an issue. Thank you.
Thank you. And should the test be done on a yearly basis or by a yearly? How often should the test be done? Thank
A
you.
yearly basis, and Cecil actually highlighted something where for men over 40, every year go get it done. So yearly, you want to go get it done. There are constantly conversations around the topic and the subject, but for men over 40, it is good to do it yearly, but specific to your medical aid and your scheme, you want to actually just find out when it's funded yearly, but yearly is advised. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Then we only have, unfortunately, for one more. Chris, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, and thanks for the presentation. So my question is around depression, and I wanted to find out if all people have the same sensitivity for, towards getting depression, or for some people with certain personality traits, let's call it that, are they more predisposed to getting depression? And if so what type of help is prescribed for either of the cases? Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a very loaded question, and it affects different people differently. And you'd find that not everyone who is diagnosed with depression or is depressed will have all the symptoms or some of the symptoms. So I think the best thing that we can do for ourselves is to take every opportunity to engage with information that will better equip us, to engage with the tools that have been made available for us, whether it's a presentation, or it is a health talk, or it is an initiative at work. You want to engage as much as you can, so that you are part of the ongoing conversation and the discoveries that are made around mental and emotional well-being, so that you can make sure that you are in a good place to deal with it. But it doesn't affect us all the same. I know at some point in my life, I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't. I am not a very irritable person. I don't have any rage or anger. But two things that happened to me. I stopped eating. I lived off sweets and liquids, and I couldn't get out of bed. I within a year, I think I took 24 days sick leave, and I know I was never sick. So it affects people differently. People with the same type of personality might experience different symptoms, and the severity of it as well. Two people can be diagnosed with depression who do the same job and have similar lifestyles, but one could be a lot more severe than the other, because it's not just about what what you encounter externally, but it could also be physiological. I hope I've answered your question.
Okay. Thank you so much. I know there's still a lot of questions that we didn't even attend to that is in the chat box. What I'm going to do, if it's okay with you, Vaughan, we have a copy of all of those questions. I will send it through to you, and then we can answer it individually. And we have your email as an attendee, so we will then just answer your question via email. If those two that have raised their hand can also just type in their question in the chat box, we'll make sure we'll get back to you and attend to your question as well. Okay. So with that, we've come to the end of our session. Thank you, Vaughan, for the presentation. I see someone mentioned we have to have these chats more than once a year, and I agree with that. So we as Bestmed will look into that to have as many conversations as possible. And then I would like to thank you for taking the time to attend this session, our member and our corporate client. And then thank you, Vaughan, for taking the time to present this to all of our members. We really do appreciate it. Our next talk is taking place next week, the 21st of June, and the topic is focused on Drug Awareness Week. So we hope to see you there. And then also, just on a last note, we are going to make this recording available to everyone that attended. And I see there's a lot of questions asking that, can they have a copy of the presentation? Yes, you will receive it within the next day or so. There will be a link to it that shares the whole conversation as well as the slides. So with that, have a lovely afternoon, everyone, and take care. And hopefully we will see you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Exercise.
Thank you. Bye.
Don't
Thank you very
check the
much.
belly.
Bye. Bye-bye.
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 Bye, good people. Remember to eat healthy.
Bye. Mpeso has worked for centuries.
Why does mine come again?
It's typing the wrong way.
I don't know. I'm not gonna say anything. Okay.